call a special meeting of council to order for Thursday, December 14th. And first item of business is new councillor business. Anyone have any new councillor business for today?
Save it for Monday.
Save it for Monday. Perfect. 3 reports, and the first item for today is our report 17189 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding our preliminary budget items report that is included in our package for today. Councillor Rogers.
I'll move that report number 17-189 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding preliminary budget items be received for discussion. Council will need to provide direction regarding the previously identified projects that are included within this report, and separate motions are recommended for each project.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor McFadden. Discussion? Councillor Rogers and Councillor Parzell.
I just wonder how you want to play this out.
So we want to do and receive this report. We'll have a little bit of discussion on it, and then we're going to start to move through the agenda items that are part of our business today, and those are all recommendations or reports or motions that have been brought forward by all of council. But I thought this first preliminary budget report from Adam from CFO is really giving us some of that preliminary information for the budget discussions, and will start us moving forward in that regard. It isn't, today isn't about kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of operating and all of that stuff, but we really want to start to pick off and start that prioritization process of, we got a basket of money for our capital, and how are we going to prioritize that within the whole picture. And this preliminary report gives us some of that information, first of all, for council to have that information as we move forward and start to discuss and prioritize these items. So that's kind of how I got it in my
That's
mind.
kind of how I got it, because it just, it was for this purpose was, other than special items, to be researched for further possible inclusion in the 2018.
Right.
This is because usually I go in another direction.
Yeah, and this isn't about operating today, it's just about starting this prioritization of capital that we want to see administration do some work on, so that when we get into budget discussions, council then have the opportunity to have the information in that entire basket of money available to say this is going to be a priority and we're going to include it, or we're not. And today just gives us that, say, well, what do we want, what are those priority items that we want for further discussion and allow council administration to do the work on.
Okay.
Councillor Parslow, then Councillor Javecka.
I'm trying to get my
Okay.
computer under control.
Councillor Javecka.
So, I just want to make sure that I'm on the right track
Sure.
here, that I understand it, you know.
I'll keep you on there.
It looks like our total projected revenue here is 47.8 million. Of that, 41.7 million, or 87%, is set aside for operating expenses. So that leaves 6.1 million that's available for capital projects. And further in the report, it states that we got 6.8 or 6.9 million that's already designated for capital projects, so we're already oversubscribed. So that means administration, in simple terms, has to reduce the capital projects by $800,000 to be within our projected budget. So all of these new wonderful proposals that we've made would have to take place of some of the existing capital projects that you've already designated.
That's exactly right.
Reading that correct?
Yep, that's exactly right. And so to me, I think that's the point today, is saying we're going to go through this list of ideas and suggestions that council have for consideration in our 2018 budget. And we say, you know what, that one there is going to prioritize in there for us to have the information. And then when we get into our capital budget discussions in early 2018, council will then make a decision and say, listen, if we want to, I'll give an example. If we want to put $1 million into flood prevention and mitigation, and we want to put $1 million into that fund, where is that money coming from? And is it bumping paving or sidewalks or building? So but we just need to prioritize that, understanding, or we're going to increase the amount of money we have available through borrowing or other areas. But you're exactly right. We have 6 point some million, and that's in the hopper now. Duncan?
So through your worship, and I'll just add a quick comment to that. We're very early in the budget process, earlier than usual. We haven't confirmed a lot of those amounts, and I expect them to change somewhat, but we don't expect $10 million to show up at some point. There's going to be some movement up and down, but this is fairly close to what you'll see in your first budget report.
Go ahead.
So just further to that then, and whether it's appropriate at this meeting or not, but it seems to me, and this is just my feeling, that 41.7 million out of 47.8 million for operating is high. And going into the future, and again, it's my feeling that we should be reducing our operating costs. And I know that I've talked to administration before about that, and somebody has to identify the services that we want to reduce. And I'm just wondering if it's, again, my feeling that maybe we should be, if administration can't make a recommendation on it, maybe it's time to get a consultant that specializes in that kind of thing and to give us some advice on it.
Yeah,
but, the operating costs, if they continue, to at this level, and obviously they increase every year substantially, we'll seem to be behind the 8 ball on into the future. And I think that's what's happened since I was first involved in council back in 2001 or whatever. It's something that I don't think we have really dealt with, the operating. Like, we keep adding services because that's what we want to do. I mean, we want to provide, the quality of life and that type of thing. But, it just escalates and sneaks up on you. First thing you know, you're behind the 8 ball. You can't function anymore.
Yeah. And so we don't want to get into operating today because we still got some work to do with respect to some of the other information that's coming, and that work will start early in January, and we'll begin that budget deliberations. Today was really just this preliminary opportunity for you guys to bring forward some of those capital components that you want considered in that overall discussion we have when we start to set capital. And then if we want to move out of operating and more into capital, then that's the discussions that we're going to have. Today, these administration are going to go through a whole bunch of work providing us with the information and on this, these suggestions that council have and have brought forward. And I just thought today would be a good opportunity for us to start to pick them off and say, as we prioritize them, does this one meet the need, and is it going to fit into that overall basket, or is it something we just say, no, it's not going to make the prioritization list, and let's not have staff do a bunch of work on it. So it's just a preliminary discussion today to give administration that direction on those things that we want considered and the information in the wholesome of that. So your paving program, as an example, you got $2.5 or $3 million in there. Is something in this list by majority of council perhaps going to prioritize something above that, and we're going to move some money out of there into that? Or are we going to add more money to it? And I think that's just today is about that, going through each of these lists and say, does that one there make the cut that we want to have further information for consideration in our budget? Duncan?
Yes, through your worship, we have some additional information, and if we're asked, we can provide information, in particular roadworks, facilities, and what that looks like. But as you summed up, there's projects identified. Any new projects that are identified or make their way into the budget will have to be funded either through the existing money or through new funding, which is generally taxation, or borrowing, which is taxation.
Yeah. Councillor Parslow, you had a question?
Not so much a question, just I read with interest first of all, I appreciate being given these bookends. It's very helpful, so thank you to staff for doing that. And I know it's an informed estimate. Not holding to there's so many fluctuations, I accept all of that, but I appreciate that. So I think it's natural, unless council gives some direction otherwise, that the operating budget is continuing current levels of service and adjusted by the usual things that happen seemingly on an annual basis, and that's fine by me, yes. But I have a running tab, I should have brought it with me, of what I looked at the capital work that needs to be done in the next 10 years. And I'm at 140 million right now, okay? Which translates just coincidentally to 10 years of spending the Peace Region Agreement all on capital. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. So I'm at the moment looking at some of these lists here for the capital projects, and I'm feeling a little unsure about how this was unfold. I'm fully supportive of the intent of this meeting and will try to align myself with that. But there are a few topics that I'm going to be fettered in discussion at this meeting, and I would like to raise them at the next council meeting because they involve land, contracts, etc. They're in-camera topics. So if I stray, I'm hoping that you will be on top of me.
I'll shut your microphone off.
But it seems to me that we have a lot of capital projects, and I am hoping, and I hate to bring back past experience, but I would love to have, and I know it's going to be dynamic, in other words, it will change as circumstances change, a sort of a 10-year capital project scenario. Obviously, sometimes there will be no cost attached to it because there's no costs. Sometimes it may be dependent on external grants success. And the city's had great success in the last few years with that. But I would like to have a sort of a 10-year horizon, because some of these projects will have to be funded by borrowing. And we need to make sure, I know, what is our capacity for borrowing? We have a policy, we can by resolution adjust that, but I would love to just know where we're heading. And that's what I used to have. I had a 10-year, and I knew where the money was coming from or hoped to be acquired from. So I'm feeling that there's a lot of, there's a lot of master plans, and I'm glad we're doing that work. But I'd like to know, because how can I prioritize? I always rely upon the staff for those things that are urgent or we must be doing. And I can't see us achieving those things unless we really do what staff has been telling us to do for years. Then look at what we stopped doing some things. In other words, cutting our operating budget. And so I just want to flag that that's where I'm coming from. I look for a 10-year plan. I am not against borrowing money for some of it, but I also believe we should follow what many municipalities do and save for some of these. We know we're going to have to, for instance, one day replace the fire hall. Set up a savings account for that and make it targeted. And then we know where we hope to be. In 10 years' time, we may have 10 million set aside and we can borrow 5 or whatever and we can get on with it. So I'm feeling that we're doing the best we can with the information we have, and I put council and staff in the same boat there. But I would hope that we can looked at the operating budget a bit, because if we're looking at quality of life and safety, and I'm going to call it working environment, then we need to address some of these things that are listed. So, but I appreciate knowing the bookends.
Good.
And one question, 4% increase in taxes equals $1 million of revenue, approximately?
No.
Sorry, say that again?
A 4% increase in property tax yields $1 million in revenue?
I thought at 1% was about 140, 160. So it's about, I thought it was about 500,000-600,000.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the only other, so with respect to the report that we have from Adam in this preliminary budget items that give us that bookend, the one piece that I'd like to consider making an amendment to the motion for an additional bit of information in there is the historical tax rates. I'd like to have and see a trend and some information from administration on the historical tax rates for residential, business, commercial, and industrial light and heavy. Just for purposes of information moving forward for council as we start to make some of those prioritization decisions, and having that information available as they move into January's budget discussions. Second, so Councillor McFadden, you seconded that?
I did.
Councillor Rogers?
So are you meaning the historical mill rate or the average increase in?
No, the rates themselves and how they were, how they've been developed.
Okay. That's all.
So, any further discussion on the report from Adam?
I would just like to comment about the about what some of the things that I took out of it. Basically, probably everything that everybody here already knows, that, you know, it was only from 2012 to 15, we were only seeing average roughly $800,000 increase a year. I think our inflationary costs were about 300,000, so 600,000. So from 2015 to 2018 is what concerns me. And especially projections for 2018 going down, because we haven't raised the tax rate. And I thought that that was one thing that stuck out for me in the report. And then the previous motions to council that were brought forward in the 2018 deliberations. I'm not really 100% sure what to do with this, but it's written in there, the Encana Event Center West End Suite expansion. I had spoke to that previously, and I can't see council letting that, like, bringing that up and saying this is what we're going to spend some capital money on this year. I can't see that at all. But there is an opportunity for Global or the city to go to the public and say, you know, we can, is there an opportunity for private business to purchase equity in our facility to develop the suites or to develop any other parts of that building and work out an agreement so that they lease it, make a little bit of money, and then at the end of that lease we get the development that would be inside the building. Is that worth having a conversation?
Well, so that'll be part of that overall budget discussions when we get to approving capital, in terms of saying, okay, does that make the cut? And what's the options for us if it doesn't make the cut, to if we want it consideration? And so that'll be in that budget deliberations and discussions we have in January, February, and March.
So if I wanted to bring a motion forward that for a direction, just everybody's going to get a warning, that we possibpossibly look at private business purchasing equity in our facilities for further development. There is other opportunities. There is also through NDIT you can get a tax-free loan and stuff like that, or not tax-free but interest-free, so it's free money.
We'll make a list of
like
those items that pop up through our discussions today, and if there are some other things, we'll bring them back in at the end of the meeting for council to either make those motions for consideration and or direct administration to do that.
Okay, I just
Yep.
letting everybody know that's a
Yep.
thought that I.
Good.
Other than that, I appreciate the report, and I appreciate doing this a little bit earlier than we have in the past. Thank you.
Good. So you ready for the question on the amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And on the report itself, receiving it, that motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So now we're going to start to move through this item by item. And so the first item is 4.1, and this is a memo from Councillor Rogers in regards to the overall tangible capital asset report. And Councillor Rogers, I'll let you speak to your...
Okay, there's really not a motion that comes out of this, but, and it's not necessarily a reminder to council because everybody's aware of this anyway, but just, I'll just read it anyways because I believe it says a lot. Like the tangible capital assets from the consolidated financial statement from December 31st, 2016 was $207,804,738. Both of the 5-year budget and the stewardship statement that was adopted by council advised against any added expenditures. And our statement was, the council of City of Dawson Creek believes that the future quality of life in the community will be compromised if the current trends in revenues and expenditures are not addressed. Revenues are not growing fast enough to fund predicted future expenditures, especially for necessary infrastructure. Council intends to develop a range of solutions to protect the future of the community and urges our current citizens to actively engage us with this vital work. We have invested considerable amount of time and effort on reports that provide council with recommendations for replacement and maintenance of city infrastructure assets. I believe that council should follow the recommendations before adding additional items to the budget. I believe any considerations for adding new servicing or capital submitted by council should also include how it would be funded or a proposed funding model to support the service. I have confidence in staff to identify and prioritize the capital and operating costs at this time, and I can't really justify adding any new costs to it. Councillor Parslow had kind of alluded on this a little bit. Like I firmly believe, and I have stated, for me, it's water, sewer, roads, infrastructure. Because without that, we don't really have a community. I understand the arenas and everything, like the quality of life is there, but I think our most important things for me to be looking at are those items. I like staff's recommendations for investing money into the roads, although we were supposed to have invested through the report on roads $3 million last year, and it would be recommended another $3 million this year, so there's $6 million, so you could theoretically blow everything on just on our roads. I know the urbanization of roads, Finn subdivision and Michael subdivision, that was in the 5-year plan, but that was removed. And then same as the airport, there was part of the 5-year plan, but we would remove that back in April of 2017, and that was upwards of $20 million. So, and then there was that other report that we had received that recommended $40 million plus on replacement and repairs to city buildings and facilities. That's a concerning number, and I am glad to see that we've got several reports regarding, we're looking at fire hall, but out of that report it was mentioned city yards be done before the fire hall. So I think we should be considering that as well. Also, just with the fire hall and with city yards, that's a significant investment there of $20-something million. Also, there's other infrastructure things that we have. We just received the master drainage report. We've got flood mitigation. there's a lot of things to be discussed. But I talked about it last year, and I'm gonna do it really quick here, again this year. And that was carryover capital projects. What I've got for a list of carryover capital projects is 17th Street, there was a sidewalk, that was only a couple $100,000. But we got the 10th Street Bridge, that was a few million, that gets carried over. I think that project's probably about 90% complete. We've got the Arena 5-year plan was to invest $10 million into the arenas over 5 years. And I don't think we're doing that this year, because I was advised that, like, if we were to do the parking lot, there's some storm sewers that are gonna be running through there, so we have to kind of hold off on that, and we're gonna be monitoring the slab. But, you know, is that commitment still there for 10 million over 5 years? And should we not be putting some money away this year, because there might be a bunch of makeup? But things come, things go, and things change. We still have the the trucked waste facility. That is a carryover. Treated water storage, raw water storage, and water treatment plant upgrades. Are we investing this year and carrying on with our water treatment plant upgrades? So those, out of those carryover capital projects, if there's some that are 90% complete, can we not, because this money is used to inject and to stimulate, it'll be for the 2019 budget, but is there an opportunity here to utilize some of that carryover money, because we had significant capital projects in the water storage reservoir? I think that was like $8 million that we're going to be deferring that to, and then even the solid waste, and then the 10th Street Bridge. So there might be an opportunity to get some money from that and put it into this year's, near the end of when these projects are completed, of course. So there might be money there. And then my last statement would be, council makes decisions based on information and recommendations from staff. That's what I was told. I do believe it. There's enough reports that I've read that indicate that they're trying to bring forward everything that should be recognized. So that's where I'm at with that. I do believe that you know, there's a lot of things that I would like to see done differently, or I'd like to see more money go in other places. But that's just going to be all part of the discussion as we move through it.
Exactly.
That's all I got.
Good.
I just wanted to be.
Thanks for your input. And so we want a motion to accept your memo as presented. Can you make that by way of a motion?
Yep.
Seconded. Councillor Parslow, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Schumann, 4.2, a memo regarding recycling waste reduction.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to make the following recommendation for council's consideration, that we request staff to bring back for budget deliberations options and financial implications for a curbside recycling service in Dawson Creek. I would like options to be included that look at alternating weekly and weekly recycling and garbage collection, options that provide for weekly garbage collection with bi-weekly recycling. So I'm talking options and financial implications. And then separately, so to those first two, add in the yard waste component for the summer months, just to see what that cost looks like and how it would work. And include options for residents who may need to upside their garbage bins to accommodate bi-monthly garbage, i.e. what would it cost to that resident be to opt for a larger garbage can and the increased tipping fees. One thing that I didn't put in this motion was I would like to see also what the cost is for our garbage right now, garbage collection, all our contracts, everything that goes along with that. And not subsidized. So last year we subsidized garbage collection out of general revenues or out of reserves, out of our reserves. And so I'd like to know what the cost for garbage is if we're not subsidizing it with our surplus.
So making that by way of a motion. Do I have a
Yes.
seconder? Councillor Wilbur, discussion. Councillor Parslow.
On my recent jaunt to see my family, I did go over to the Vancouver Island, and I incidentally met with an employee of the municipality of Tomots. And I asked, why did I see in some of the residences I counted as many as 8 garbage cans, all the same color. And in that community, I was led to believe is that they have really been moving forward on the new upcoming regulations concerning organic waste in garbage. And so they take, there's no limits to the amount, but they take all the compostable and food waste from the residences, and some people, you know, have at times of the year many cans of that stuff, and then it's composted and it's sold as a money raiser by one of the service clubs. So I'm kind of interested in that because the literature is clearly showing that single source recycling is not the way to go. It should be multi-source. And you all know that I have a real aversion to corporations who do make this packaging getting away with not meeting their obligations under the statutes. But I am very interested in removing all organic, and that would include food waste from our city garbage. And so I think I would rather have Councillor Schumer's motion stand on its own if I can add an additional piece concerning organic waste as a separate motion.
Okay, and I'll just give you a little bit of kind of background in terms of how we as a municipality are part of the Peace River Regional District Solid Waste Management Plan by legislation. And so we're offering a service at the curbside to residents like we do today to pick up their waste. We're offering now or proposing under this motion to provide an option where people would be able to have their curbside recycling picked up by a contractor. But our abilities at the dealing with the recycling are built into the post-collection costs to the Peace River Regional District Solid Waste Management Plan, of which we all contribute. And so once that waste is picked up, once it's collected by our contractor, it becomes the accountability of the Peace River Regional District under that Solid Waste Management Plan and that legislation for them to deal with that post-collection costs. And so then once it's picked up, so the compostable, the organics, and our study was just done recently, an audit of it, and I think 40 or 50% of the waste that's getting into the landfill sites in the North Peace, Besborough, and the others is made up of compostables. But unfortunately, the cost of separating that is borne by the regional district, not by the municipalities. And so if we said we wanted to add that into it, it would be an added cost that our residents then would have to pay, because it isn't currently a service or a function that's provided under the Peace River Regional District. And so that's the dilemma we have, is that post-collection responsibility of waste, whether it be recycling waste or regular household waste or composting, is all the responsibility that we pay for as part of that solid waste management plan through the regional district. And so basically all we're going to do is offer through this, if it's accepted by council in the future, is the service of providing waste curbside recycling pickup by a contractor, and all of the post-collection costs become the part of the Peace River Regional District's costs that, through the solid waste management plan. Administration, Kevin, have I got that right?
Yes, Your Worship, that's how I understand it.
And Councillor Schumer?
So I really like the fact that you like the idea of keeping organics out of the landfill. I think within the city of Dawson Creek, we do collect at a location in town yard waste. And we do collect a lot of that yard waste. So that yard waste that we deal with, we take down to an area down by the city
By the
or
airport.
by the airport there, and compost it. But that's just yard waste. When you start getting into kitchen waste and those kind of things, you need different processes in order to deal with those. And to me, that would be something that the regional district would set up within their solid waste management plan at one of their facilities, some sort of composting process that we can then, and that's something I believe that they will move forward with. I mean, we did this big audit on all the waste that's coming into our landfills, and we're recognizing that there's a huge amount of organics in there. And so I think that the regional district will be moving forward with that. In my motion, it's more about just the yard waste, and I put that in there because I know that there's a lot landing in the landfill, and if we could even just deal with the yard waste, that would be a lot kept from the landfill. But frankly, I am perfectly happy with the situation we have right now, where there's a location that people can bring it to. And I mean, most people don't want to fill up their garbage receptacle with grass cuttings or weeds because they need it to fit their garbage in. So I think a lot of people are utilizing our location in town. I know there's a lot of trucks leaving there full throughout the week, so.
But the regional district don't even have
No.
a facility today
No.
to deal with that yard waste.
No, they have nothing. I mean, we're dealing with our
Yeah.
yard waste at the city level, but I think that to move into compost, the kitchen waste and all of that kind of stuff, I think we actually need a special process. And they've got those things going on down south, and it's just a matter of time, I think, for us to get into it. But mainly, I just want the curbside recycling.
Councillor
I wanna
Rogers
see
and
the
Councillor
numbers.
Parslow?
Yep. There was, I believe, the city of Dawson Creek currently does the composting, and I believe there was a report that we had to meet some government regulations here recently. And then there was another report regarding the costs that are associated with having that yard waste composted that we are currently doing. So I guess part of this report would include the costs that we are incurring right now for yard waste, and that cost, if we went ahead working so that it was hauled away from the curb, that those costs would therefore could be possibly applied to the curbside recycling program and the composting and everything else.
Duncan, can you,
Yeah, so through your worship, through this motion, it asks us to look at yard waste collection. So in that report, we can talk about our current practice and what we're doing and the amounts that we're collecting and what it's being used for. And I'll ask Kevin right now. I don't believe I do believe we're receiving more yard waste than we use. And we are the end point for yard waste right now. We are the collection point. We can't take it to the regional district. Maybe there's other strategies, but that'll all be included in the report,
okay.
if approved.
Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, the reason why most municipalities, I'm aware, have moved away from single source is because of contamination.
No.
And the stores, large quantities of paper and cardboard products are just buried, not recycled. And so I think, again, I've not, I got the impression that the compostable material, and organics, right, were handled very differently. And they were the responsibility. Every area is covered by a regional district, but the municipality was dealing with it themselves.
Yeah.
So the only difference between what I'm saying is a desirable condition is that whereas people currently, with their vehicles, haul their garden waste to a site established by the city, that we look at what would it take, because my understanding, 2020, you cannot have 75% of the province is to have, and it's a certain level of organics, because methane, as we know, is far worse than carbon dioxide as it relates to, global warming. And so there's a real push there. So I want to, whatever happens has to be not the worst of practice, which I would submit is what happens in this region, but the best of practice.
Hey,
And paid for by the responsible people.
yeah.
That's why
No.
I included that in there, that's
And
why.
the distinction I make between plastic bottles and plastics and so on is garden waste, food waste is not generated by the manufacturers of
No.
the packaging, and that should legitimately be borne by users.
Yeah, using it, exactly. Councillor Javetkov?
We have two private service providers right now in Dawson Creek providing curbside recycling. And I don't think, in my opinion, that it's wise for the city to take that away from private industry. They're providing a service, it's a reasonable fee. Let's let them operate it and let them have the headaches, all this additional contamination, all that stuff.
Thank you. Further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 4.3, Councillor Parslow, Rotary Lake replacement.
Well, I did say that I'd like to have a motion after Councillor Schuman's motion.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Same topic?
Sure.
And I'm sure some of it's covered off in what Councillor Schuman had there, but I'm pretty hot and heavy on the organics, as you can tell. I would like to move, so I would like Councillor Schuman to receive this as a compliment to what she's put forward. Staff.
Sure, she'll let us know.
Yeah, I'm sure she will.
She might.
Staff research and cost the options for eliminating organic waste in the community's garbage.
I like it.
Seconded, Councillor Schuman. Discussion? Administration?
Okay.
Good. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried, and Councillor Javetkov is opposed. We'll note that for the minutes. 4.3, we have Councillor Parslow Rotary Lake replacement.
Yes, we've discussed this at a council level. We know there's some issues associated with the continuing operation of Rotary Lake, so I'd like to move that in the event council decides not to operate the existing Rotary Lake, the staff be directed to develop a capital and operating budget for 2018 for the replacement of Rotary Lake with aquatic features that includes, but is not limited to, the expansion of the existing splash park. Further, that the design and operation of the proposed aquatic features meet all the requirements of Northern Health, and further, the proposed features are to have low operating costs.
Seconded, Councillor McFadden. Discussion.
If I can
Councillor-
speak to the motion.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Parslow, then
Okay,
Councillor
as you-
Rogers,
as you
then
know,
Councillor Javetkov.
Thanks to the cooperation of the city, Northern Development, and the Mile Zero Park, a splash park was put in to complement the Rotary Lake. I think, as we talked about quality of life, I'm always being made mindful, and I am mindful of the fact that for many people who cannot afford holidays away from town or attendance at high-priced events, this is a free recreational facility, is appreciated by many families. And if Rotary Lake is a problem, I think it would continue to enrich the lives of our community and the rural areas for a place for young families to go, and in the hot weather months, which aren't that many in this community. And maybe it can be done by a paddling pool or an additional splash park, and I think we should consider that in our upcoming budget.
Thank you. So I got Councillor Rogers, Councillor Javetkov, and Councillor Schuman.
Well, I hate to be the doorstopper here, but NDIT didn't fund the splash park. The
No, that's
NDIT funded the paving, and then therefore enabled the city to help
That's right.
with the contribution for it. the splash park, that was built by volunteers. Rotary Lake was built by volunteers. The Mile Zero Park is run by volunteers. I would suggest that let the volunteers develop a plan and a strategy, and if they want to do an expansion and stuff like that, I think that they should do it in Knox City, and I don't know where the money could possibly come from for funding a splash park when we have, and you had said it yourself, Mr. Barzo, over $140 million that we need to be investing into the city in the next 10 years. I understand the quality of life and everything like that, but I think that if that's an initiative that had previously done by volunteers, I say let them do it, and I don't think that that staff needs to be putting together a report when they have so many other ones to be considered.
Thank you for that. Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, you know, we've just talked about the fact that we're in this predicament because we keep adding services, and in my opinion, I think we have to start reducing services, not adding more. Again, we're taking a facility that's been developed by community and taking over the responsibility for it. It doesn't make sense to me. So, you know, unless we get a lot more money from the Peace River Agreement, like, you know, double it or something, we could look at something like that. But I just don't see where it's realistic for us.
Thank you. Councillor Schumann?
Yeah, so there is a really good chance that Rotary Lake is not going to reopen. We all understand that there's certain things going on out there, and if it did reopen, we'd probably have to take it on anyways, take it out of the hands of our volunteers who run it. And so the Rotary Lake area, the land down there, the park, it's a gathering place for young families. Councillor Parslow spoke to it. You know, not everybody can afford to go to the Okanagan for 2 weeks, or and frankly, we don't really have too many lakes that are close by for most people to visit. And I think that there is a great opportunity to, you know, if we have to lose our lake, there's a great opportunity to provide a beautiful gathering space down there with a wading pool, the splash park, the picnic benches, the shade, the grass, continue to have a great gathering place for our community. And I totally support this. I think that, you know, if Rotary Lake is going to go away, and then we need to provide something down there for recreation that does not have a cost to it for our community members.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Javetkov?
You know, I agree with everything that Cheryl said. Like, all the attributes are awesome, but it's all about the money.
Good. Further discussion? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Opposed, Councillor Rogers, Councillor Javetkov. Council 4-4, we have Councillor Parslow, Exhibition Grounds.
Right. Well, as a preamble, I could have said this earlier.
We'll see how long the preamble goes before we... I've let Councillor Rogers preamble, and
No, this is
I
a short
regretted
preamble.
that. No, I didn't.
I just, again, as I said earlier, and as Councillor Rogers and Javetkov have been listening more carefully, I have said that for me, we have to find money in the operating budget, and some of these things are one-time expenditures. I'm not adding to the operating costs, so that's not my intention. Now, this one is a big one. We know that we have exhibition grounds, the Collins exhibition grounds, and we know we must eventually look at that situation down there. And I believe that we be prudent to set money aside systematically, with discipline, so that we have the capacity to do whatever's necessary to maintain facilities there. So I am a great believer in saving for projects, balanced with some judicious borrowing. And I know that we've all discussed this matter before, and I'm just putting it forward as a reminder and for consideration. I'm not stuck on the amount, but I think it needs to be sizable.
Thank you. So that's a motion, seconded? A seconder for the motion? Councillor Wilbur. Discussion. Councillor Rogers?
We had a building pool fund that we had established, and I don't even think there was a policy around it. Can I maybe ask staff to clarify whether that still exists?
Sure. Duncan? Adam?
So through your worship, I'd have to look back. Council hasn't allocated any funding into a building pool. We haven't created a reserve that has nothing in it. When council allocates some funding, we can create that reserve.
Well, so maybe Councillor Rogers that's a great question that we'll ask administration. In fairness to Adam and Duncan, we'll ask that information to come back for our January budget discussions about the history of a building pool, building reserve, building fund. Just because I don't think it's fair that we have that, these guys have that information currently today.
I can confirm nothing's been allocated
Yeah.
to a building fund.
But I mean, Shelley or
Yep.
Jim or those guys that have been here for a long time would have known the history of that. Obviously, they don't. Councillor Javetkov and then Councillor Schumann.
This is one thing I remember. We did set up a line item for a fund, but we didn't put anything into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was,
It's the empty stocking fund.
and that's what I was gonna say. This is, I think this is Councillor Rogers' baby. There was an effort to get rid of the carbon fund at some point and change it to a building fund
fund.
or something like that, and then that didn't happen, and so then this other reserve thing was set up. Staff is correct, we never did put
Is that what you were
money
trying
into
to
it.
do?
Well, my whole intent
It
was
was.
to start with,
Yeah, go ahead. He asked you the question.
yeah, it all started out as a building pool fund. I recognized when I first got on council that we needed to start putting money away for our building, same as what we do for our equipment pool and everything else. So that got okay. And then with the carbon thing, I said, well, there's a chance to put some money into it, so maybe we should be looking at putting some of that carbon fund money back in the buildings, because we use the carbon fund money for our buildings for changing light bulbs and pumps and stuff like that. So that would have been a way of getting money into that. And then the infrastructure money that would be needed for changing light bulbs and stuff like that, I guess that would be operations, but could have come out of that.
Councillor Parslow, you had a...
Yes, well, I know with all these items, okay, obviously the question will be foremost in the minds of probably every council member is affordability. And this is why I said earlier that I'm going to have some problems with this meeting, although I want to support the intent. I mean, so I'm saying we all know the background, we all share a common understanding of this, so I'm not going to mention it at this meeting, but if we don't do this, then the question is, then what? And that should be withheld for another meeting. But again, some other items that are here is how are we going to in this process? Because we all want to be sensitive, and are sensitive to the fact that some of this work will take a fair amount of research by staff. And so I'm wondering, I had in my little mind that we'd have a chart and everything we'd say, yeah, we'd put a dollar figure there, and then we'd say, well, of this list, what's the top second priority? And then staff focus on those rather than the whole shopping list.
Yeah, well, and so today is about saying, okay, what are the things we want to put into that list? And then the prioritization process will happen in early 2018, because that's our job, is to prioritize the money that we have available and how much of that money are we going to spend, and are we going to increase the amount of money we have by borrowing more? But but the amount of work, I wanted to try to minimize that for administration by just having this preliminary discussion, and it's been very good so far.
Yeah,
You
so
guys have done a great job.
Maybe
I'm
we should-
buttering the buns here.
Staff's list isn't getting any
So
smaller.
Councillor Schumann and then Councillor Rogers.
So I look at this motion and I think to myself that there's a lot of work to be done before we start. I mean, I guess it's prudent to budget money into things you don't know what you're going to do with
Exactly.
them. But at the same time, I know we've got a lot of work to do down there around how it's operated, how it's all these different things, and I think that that's going to take time, and that perhaps that's not this year's budget that needs to take $1 million hit for the fairgrounds. I get that we need to do work down there. I don't know that it has to be $1 million a year. And there's a lot of preliminary work that needs to be done, i.e., discovering what we actually have to do. And so I feel like this is a little bit soon to be throwing $1 million out of this year's budget into it. I recognize that, and I understand the whole idea of creating money for things in the future, but I feel like there's a lot of work that has to be done, and it doesn't need to come out of this year's budget.
Councillor Rogers?
Yeah, door stopping again. $1 million. Wow.
What's $1 million?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, where does it come from? And
Don't worry about that.
frankly, the only reason I vote in favor of this is to see where staff's gonna find this $1 million that we can put towards it.
They can find $1 million, I want to talk to them?
But, well, if they can find $1 million, I got a whole bunch of other things that I think are more important, like flood mitigation, looking at our storm drainage system, it's just, for me, flood mitigation, like, I can't, after, I could go on about that, but I just look at it and I go,
It's further down the
and
list.
Councillor Schumann is right. There's a cart out in front of the horse on this one, and I should recognize it, because we still do not know exactly what is happening down there, and there's a lot more work to be done.
Thank you.
So I'll have to see.
So the economic, for me, the economic analysis, the work we did this year and the STEAM reports for the Pee Wee Provincials and the Mauser Cruisers and the Rodeo and the U-17 was all about getting us to that sports and event tourism strategy and understanding how much and what and where we invest the money to make, hopefully get the best possible return. And so to me, my focus now today is if we're putting, building a reserve fund for infrastructure, it's my first priority is there a fire hall. I think that's a 5-year, we really need to have that in place, so I can't support it today. And it's not that I don't feel the exhibitions, it's a critical piece of our sport and event tourism, but I don't have that information yet from the analysis of that data that we're collecting. And hopefully we'll have that in 2018 to be able to build that model of how we invest in event and sport tourism for the benefits of the future. And it might be that we have to build these funds for infrastructure, but I don't know that today. Councillor Parslow?
Well, I had a preamble, I'd like to have a mid.
Mid-amble now? And a post-amble?
He's not there yet.
I'm bringing these things forward because that we know they're things that we have discussed, and I'm limited in what I can say about this topic. So I hope that we would have a 10-year capital plan. And somehow what's going to happen first, where the money's, this has to be included, or we have to make alternative decisions. Some of the comments that have been made, I mean, let me tell you a story about my roof. I knew that I had to replace my roof. I didn't know what materials I was going to use, who was going to do it, or if I would do it. Well, I had to have 2 knees replaced, and I realized I couldn't do it. But I saved up money for it. And I saved up $25,000. And I got my roof done for $8,000. but I had the money, right? And I want the city to be in that position. I want it to be ahead of the curve, not chasing around its tail and not knowing what's going to hit us next year from one year to the other. I want good planning, and I want to know where the money's coming from. And if we're going to do something about this, we need to be setting money aside. And we won't know exactly all the details, okay? And then we say, oh, we got the plan. Now where's the money coming from? Oh, you guys haven't saved up for that? How stupid of you. You knew you were going to have to do something. So I say shame on some of you buddies of mine for thinking, talking that way. That's my mid-amble.
Thanks, that's the mid-amble? He's got the mid-amble in. I'm not sure if we're gonna get to a post-amble or not,
We might
no.
not make it to post.
Okay, well, I'm gonna ask if there's any further discussion or any other ambling that anybody wants to do.
Well, I'm scared now.
Ambling?
Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's defeated, thank you. 4.5, Councillor Javetkov, flood prevention.
Okay, you guys can all get back at me here. I move that city allocate $2 million to flood prevention,
Where's the money coming from?
and specifically for crossing upgrades on 17th Street and 102nd Avenue.
Thank you, seconded.
Which one was that?
Hold it.
The first one.
Item, its memo is 4.5.
4.5.
Mine's got flood
I move that
prevention.
I got flood mitigating.
Mine says flood prevention.
No, so we got two.
There's
There's
two.
flood prevention and then mitigating flood risk by Councillor Parslow. So flood
Yeah.
prevention
Well, what-
is Councillor Javetkov's. I move that the city allocate $2 million to flood prevention, i.e. the crossing upgrades at 17th Street and 102nd Avenue.
And if we get a second,
I'm-
I'll speak to it.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the motion?
I'll let him talk.
Councillor Rogers, seconded. Councillor Javetkov.
Hey, this is very specific. I mean, we've had a serious flood at Bergeron's funeral home. Their cost of recovering that building was over $700,000. They don't have the insurance anymore. They can't get it. They're sitting there waiting for the next flood. And I guess if there's another flood, then they bear the cost of their recovering their building or shut it down, tear it down, whatever. I think we need to be seen to be doing some flood prevention. I know that we're doing some significant flood prevention now in pursuing a new structure on 8th Street to prevent, you know, the kind of flooding that we've had. But these situations, I mean, we've had 5 or 6 major flood events since 1990. And it's just something that I think needs to be addressed. We have to start working on it. So that's my spiel.
Thank you. Councillor Parslow?
Well, yeah, I view flooding as a major topic for council to try to address without the levels of government. I'm sure we all do. I'm just a little, I need some more, a little bit of detail about the motion here. So the flood crossing, you used the word flood prevention, right? How would doing the upgrades at 17th and 102nd prevent the flood? I just don't understand the prevention.
Well, the structures right now are damming the water.
Yes.
So when the water comes up to those structures, it floods over and causes the flood.
Okay, so
This is
wanting
prevent,
to
this is allowing,
minimize the flooding impact by the blocking
well,
of
it's
those.
preventing flooding in those areas.
So just for clarification, the crossing at 17th Street, and that's that culvert, small bridge, is it? That
Right.
culvert right there at
Right,
17th
by the old-
by Ross Harcourt's in behind his. And then 102nd is across the street there.
And $2 million, I mean, it may be less, it may be more, I don't know, but I guess if we agree that we should get a report, then that would be identified.
Okay. Councillor Schumann? And
So,
then Duncan, I'll get you to.
yeah, because I'm gonna give
Ask
him
me a
some
question.
more.
Okay.
Yeah. So right now we're involved in some flood mitigation work about with the creek in mind, et cetera, et cetera. We're also involved in, we just received our drainage master plan with a bunch of things to do, and so I hear Councillor Javetkov say that we need to look like we're doing things. To me, I feel like we are doing things, like maybe we're not, specifically working on those areas, but I think that out of the work that we do, there will be areas that we need to focus and spend money on, and I worry that without waiting for the investigation, without waiting for all of the things that need to be looked at and studied and assessed, and I mean, we don't know for sure that putting $2 million into that specific area there will stop this from happening to the Bergerons. And I empathize greatly with the Bergerons, don't get me wrong, but I feel like that we're starting this plan, we're moving forward to assess the situation and get to the bottom of it and really understand what it is we need to do. And I feel like this is, again, jumping the gun a little bit in moving forward with this specific upgrade when we don't know that it will appease or mitigate the situation.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers?
Okay. I've spent a whole lot of time on this, and I've sent mayor and council and staff, because I get excited when I'm reading stuff about flood mitigation these days. But I've spent days just reviewing and everything else, and staff is working on it. They've contacted the government already. There has to be a plan. Councillor Beckhoff, I've sent you some information on what you're allowed to do in the creek and when you're allowed to do it, and staff was right the other day when they said it was, you can only pretty much work on it in the summertime, and you have to have this plan. I've looked at what Abbotsford has been doing. Abbotsford, I looked at that community and said, okay, it's similar to Dawson Creek. It's surrounded by farmland. It has a little bit, some mountains. It's got a bunch of creeks. Anyways, after doing all of that stuff, the direction that we're going is correct. Like, I'd love to just jump in that creek with an excavator and just start ripping and tearing. But you can't do that. The creek isn't even ours. It's, I wish you could. The creek isn't even.
Try it and see how it goes.
It's the citizens of British Columbia own that creek. Anything that has to be done has to go through the government of British Columbia. So, and even at that, there's the riparian areas that are along that creek. We have to consider those as well. It's also, but the main point that I got from the whole thing was this water does not originate in Dawson Creek. This water comes from Bear Mountain, it comes from the farmlands, it falls from the sky. Any water that falls from the sky is the property of the government of British Columbia. All streams, creeks, and drainage canals are the province and responsibility of British Columbia. So the farmland that is out there has been created by deforestation over the years. Those fields that are plowed up, there's silt that comes down off of the fields, through the ditches out in the rural area, through all the other tributaries to Dawson Creek. So all of that water has to be considered. And if you're going to do flood mitigation, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to build ponds, retention ponds, outside of the city in the regional district or part of the parks over by 108th where they can collect that water. But you're also collecting the sediment from the farmland. You're also collecting the herbicides and the pesticides as well, because they've mentioned some stuff regarding that. But there's a whole lot of stuff that has to go on. And it just kind of goes around and around, because I actually tried to fill out an application to work in the creek. You're gonna need a consultant. Anyways, So by putting money aside for it, I think that when it comes time to do something, council's gonna find the money. But let's first work through it and find out what we can and can't do. There's nothing that we can do this time of year anyways, because if you put in an application to do anything, it's gonna get rejected because it's not the time to do it according to the website and everything that I was on. Thank you. Anyways.
Councillor Javetkov?
Anybody want to talk about that stuff, let me know.
I'm sure they'll call you.
Oh, yeah.
Councillor Javetkov.
I don't have anything more to add other than, you know, it doesn't matter where the water comes from. It's us that's getting impacted. So, you know, for the regional district to take responsibility for our crossings, I don't think that's going to happen. I think, you know, we have to be doing it ourselves.
And I think this is a great, honestly I do, I say this, that I think this flood mitigation planning work that's underway right now is going to be a real value for us, and doing that planning work and the work that we need to do to start to identify what are those key things that we need to do to help. And I want to use the term very specifically, minimize and mitigate the risk rather than eliminate. And I think that's the worry for folks is we're never going to eliminate it. You get 120 millimeters of rain in 24 hours, we're going to have a flood. And it doesn't matter what you do in that flood plain, you're going to flood. That's the hard part. We got to mitigate it. We have to minimize the risks they have. And I think once we understand that, then we can start to put some money forward to where are those pinch points that we have in those areas for those residents and businesses that are going to be impacted by it. Sorry, Councillor Parslow and then Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said. We can't eliminate it, but we can certainly minimize its impact. And I think it's a responsibility of city to exercise as great as effort we can in this area. So this particular motion has got nothing to do with the regional or who this water belongs to. It's identifying 2 points that in the last couple of floods have clearly indicated that they are pinch points. Using your word you just used, they are pinch points. So this motion is that we eliminate those 2 pinch points by some capital improvement. I think again, I differ from, I think, some of you in that, well, we know that these are pinch points. I would not be advocating for doing this unless it's part of the overall mitigation plan. But I do believe that we know it's going to be part of the mitigation plan. Okay? And so therefore it's wise to set money aside for it. And again, you know, we don't know the details yet, but we know it's coming. Are we just going to wait and then suddenly look for all this money for all these different things? I think we've got to be proactive and say, yeah, we don't know the fine detail, but it's going to happen. We need to correct this. We need to work on an overall plan, but these will be 2 points, I'm sure, will be addressed that they need to be radically altered.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers and then Councillor Javetkov and Councillor Wilbur.
I was just gonna say, we're all in this together. Like, it's the regional district, it's the province of British Columbia, it's the city of Dawson Creek. So, you know, if you want Dawson Creek just to go ahead and start doing stuff, right, it's a partnership. And I think that we have to get those partners to the table, and we have to get some more information on what we can actually do. Like, ripping up the whole road and stuff like that, or changing it, but you know, do you put it, like, what do you build? I think that when it comes right down to it, there'll be money, and you know, we'll find it somewhere. We'll have to get it from somewhere. But what do you? It's going to get down to what do you want to get rid of? Do you want to get rid of it? Do you want to get rid of the fairgrounds? Do you want to get rid of the airport? Do you want to get rid of an arena? You know, my feeling is there's a possibility of heading that way. But I think that with this, council has committed to flood mitigation? Like, do we have to put a dollar value on it right now? I don't think it's time yet.
Thank you. So I got Councillor Javetkov and Councillor Wilbur.
So I guess the example that I would use is 15th Street. The culvert that was there, the culverts, were too small, and they got flooded out and washed out. So what did we do? We replaced it with a larger crossing that will take the water. So we shouldn't have floods there anymore, or we shouldn't have damage from the floods. And that's what I'm looking at. And again, this is just a report. Like, not that I advocate giving administration numerous reports, but I think this one is significant enough that it's worth getting some information on.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
Well, those particular two pitch points, I think we talked at great length and set direction for staff at our last council meeting, so I think they're working on it. So looking at the next motion that's coming up, I think may address all of these issues in a broader form. And so I won't be supporting this motion, but I would just like to call the question, because I think the next motion probably addresses all of these issues that we're discussing.
Thank you. So did I have any other speakers lined up before I said that? Ready for the question? Question's been called. All in favor? Opposed? It's defeated. 4546, Councillor Parslow, mitigating flood risk.
I move that the city establish a capital fund for mitigating flood risk in the city. Further, that the city budget $500,000 a year to this capital fund beginning in the 2018 budget year until a mitigation plan is established and completed.
Seconded, Councillor Wilbur. Discussion. Councillor Schumann, then
So-
Councillor Wilbur.
So I like this one better because it's planning, I mean, we are doing our mitigation, our flood mitigation planning right now. We are going to need funds in the future to roll out whatever upgrades need to be done. So this isn't specifically saying this spot and that spot and the other spot. This is more like, let's put a little money away so that when we do complete these plans, or this risk management plan, and we do have some things that need to get done, to me, this makes more sense. Money towards the flood mitigation plan, once we have the plan. So this makes better sense to me than specifically allocating millions of dollars to certain spots. And when we don't know that that's exactly the spot that needs it.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
Yeah, no, and just to add to that, I think once we have that plan and all of this information's gathered and we get to the end, what we think maybe is a pinch point or a problem, it may not be. Maybe it's something else. So I like the idea of planning ahead. I also like the idea of having money available that maybe we can leverage some other partnership or support or other funding avenues because we've already pre-planned and put the money there. So, and I do feel for everyone that has gotten flooded and could be flooded, but we have to do it right as best we can the first time and not keep creating pinch points further down the system. So I like this one better, and I will be supporting this. I just think it's a better plan and gives us more leverage into the future.
Thank you. For me, and I'm going to use my lay view of a resident here that watches floods occur over the last 30 or 40 years, and it always seems like when you get these extreme weather events and we get tons and tons of water running down through the creek, and you start, as soon as it starts to build up at 8th Street, then you know it's backing up through 15th Street and back through 17th Street and 102nd and 17th Street and 106th. But the work that has been done and will be done, as we understand it, both and Councillor Javetkov mentioned the culverts at 15th Street are gone now, and we have a bridge, and we've fixed the bridge at 10th Street that's going to help flow because it's been raised, and 8th Street we understand is part of the plan for the provincial government to replace that culverts there to put a bridge in. And to me, we've mitigated some of the flood risk potential of infrastructure with that stuff that's gone on already at 15th Street and 10th Street now, although 10th Street was a bridge. But then to me, once we have that, those major blockages that were creating the blockages in the past that created the flooding, increasing the risk of flooding because of 8th Street and the culverts at 15th Street. We're putting $150,000 into a flood mitigation plan this year that then is going to give us some information from some experts in terms of here's where your points are. And I'm not necessarily sure that even once all these other things are done, that 17th Street and 102nd that were identified in the previous motion might be areas that we really need to do some work on. But I just don't know that the work that we've done today isn't mitigating the risks of flooding. And I absolutely think that we're going to need to do some work. I just think that until we get that report from the flood mitigation folks that we've already engaged, to then point us in the direction of saying, okay, here's your issues from an expert point of view, that give us that advice and information to make some decisions then about here's what you better do now in the short term, long term to help mitigate that risk, because here's where they are. Anyway, I just think about it from that perspective. So, so anyway, I got Councillor Schumann, Parslow, and Roger.
Yeah, and that's how I feel too, and it's not just the flood mitigation risk plan thing that we're doing now. There's also, I mean, we just received our master drainage plan. I absolutely believe that once we start implementing the recommendations in that drainage master plan with some of the different things that have been brought forward and said, you know, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, like, to me, that is flood mitigation, and it's a master plan. There's things that are gonna come up in this budget, next budget, next budget, next budget, for what was it, 10 years or something, that we were gonna have to put money into this sewer, or this drainage master plan. Then there's all the work we're doing with our sewer master plan. That is also going to, and is already helping to mitigate some of the damage from these flood incidents. So yeah, it's always great to put money aside, but honestly, I feel like we've got a lot of plans underway and that we should just start ticking them off in our drainage master plan, our sewage master plan, start ticking those things off, putting our money to those things, waiting for our risk management, flood risk management plan to come forward, and then think about this.
We'll have to move you and Councillor Parslow so you can sit closer to Councillor Rogers. That's what he
Why?
said right out of the gate. Councillor Parslow, I'm kidding you. Councillor Parslow to Councillor Rogers.
Yeah,
He might cover it off.
I mean, we know that much of Dawson Creek is built in a floodplain. And we know that with climate change, and the forecast is that these heavy rain episodes are going to be more the norm than the exception. So we know we're going to have problems west of 15th Street. I've heard that the work that's been done for 8th Street and between 8th and 15th, that will help, but west of there, no. We know that the grant that we have, we're using right now, is one of the main products of that will be revised floodplain analysis. But again, we need to be prepared to be able to act quickly, because as soon as we can alleviate or mitigate the flooding issues, the better it is for so many of our residents. And we should have money set aside for it. If we don't, when the plan is there, we'll be sitting around wondering where we can raise X number of dollars so that we can maybe match dollars given to us by federal agencies and provincial agencies. So this is just part of the planning process. It's inevitable. There will be more flooding. It's not pleasant. It's a lot of work, but we've got to set aside some money, even though we don't know exactly how it's going to be spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Mid-amble?
No, that would be concluding.
Post-amble?
No, the post-amble may come out of these guys.
We'll see how the vote goes. Councillor Rogers.
I was just gonna ask
Nobody
staff for a
wants
verbal
trigger.
update on where we're actually at with that, because they've done some work since the last time we talked.
Duncan?
So through your worship, we're talking flood mitigation. So we, as noted at the last meeting, we had spoken with the ministry and talked about what kind of plan would be required and how we would go about that. Right now, we're at the point of putting that plan together. So our last conversation, and Kevin can jump in here in a minute, was we won't tell you what you can't do. You tell us what you want to do, and we'll tell you if you can or can't do that, or how you can do it. So we're working on that piece right now, telling them where some of the areas we've identified are, and that we'd like to go in there and remove some of that debris. We're still putting that together, and they'll tell us whether we can do it or not, or a variation of. Kevin, did I miss anything? So I'm hoping to have something in front of council in January.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff, like there's mapping of the creek that has to be, like intensive mapping. I had a call, talk to somebody about this. And basically it's flying a drone over top of the creek and doing mapping that way, and then sending all of that information to a hydrologist. And the hydrologist can actually calculate how much water that creek will hold. And also, what other communities have done is they put up monitoring devices so that they can actually monitor the flow of water, because you need to know, if you're going to help work on mitigating, you need to know what the flow of water is going in and out of your community. And so there's piles and piles of work. And to do the monitoring part of it was $330,000 that it cost to get 6 monitoring stations out and stuff like that. So there's lots to do.
Okay, thank you. So any further discussion?
My post-am was, I know the solution to the flooding problems. It will cost you about 6.6 million, and it involves preventing water coming in during those rain systems. So I just want to be a bit of a prophet.
Like the Premier of Manitoba did, he built Duff's Canal around Winnipeg, and then that solved it all, and moved it to the folks north.
And flooded out the region.
So, you ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried, thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break now for a bio break quickly.
Yeah, before we deal with the airport.
I wasn't sure that my hand.
Back in and I negotiating.
Are we ready? So we're going back into now our agenda item, and we have Councillor McFadden and Javetkov want to make a joint motion under 4.7 and 4.8, and I'll let them wrestle as to who wants to make the motion on the airport runway extension.
I'll defer to Councillor Schmidt.
I'll second Gary's motion.
That he's deferring to you.
So he's deferring to you.
Well, let's wait, let's count how
All
many
right, I
each one
move that the
has.
runway extension be considered in the capital budget discussions for 2018, and that would be a 1,000-foot extension to include Councillor Javetkov's motion.
Let me second it.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor McFadden and then Councillor Schumann.
Your Worship, I think most of the work has been done on this except the final numbers, and we have reports coming out the wazoo about airport and passenger leakage. And once Council approves this, then there's also funding that can be accessed through NDIT, ACAP, and the federal government has an infrastructure program that, is my understanding, staff perhaps could help, is leaning heavily or focusing on airport expansions. Is that what the new infrastructure funds are about?
So, through your worship, one of the reports that's been provided to council, it had a number of the opportunities that were available. We would have to update that, but it talked about how much of a potential extension could be funded by other parties. So we would include that if it were approved.
And all of that information is what you would bring forward in the report for
Correct.
council's consideration. Thank you. Councillor Schumann?
Yeah, I'm just curious as to, like, I know that the runway extension is currently in our 5-year plan. It's out, it's out now, it's in.
So through your worship, I have the April 11, 2017 5-year financial plan, and in there it was taken out along with the Michaels subdivision was also removed from that 5-year plan in order to allow the budget to balance 5 years.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Parslow?
based upon past experience where some city projects involving renovations to existing structures come in at a certain price and they find that the existing structure is not sound. Has there been a study to determine if any work is needed on the existing runway?
I don't know, the airport managers here or staff could answer that better than
Duncan?
So, through your worship, and I'll get Patrick to provide a little bit of information, but resurfacing is required on the runway in the near future. I don't believe it's in 2018, but very soon. And if we were going to provide an extension or we were going to work on an extension, we would look at that at the same time. It makes sense, efficiency and logistically. However, that funding piece, I think, has some more opportunity through ACAP or BCAP, correct?
So the rehabilitation project will be 100% funded by ACAP.
Resurfacing, right? Correct. So that is a ACAP eligible project.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons?
Same topic. The subsurface, did the last year's flood damage the west part of that runway, the subsurface? Or was it just the surface was covered in debris? I know the west side was. I just wonder, is any damage done to the subsurface?
So through your worship, I'll ask, Patrick wasn't here, so I'll ask Kevin on if we did any patching or repairs there.
Well, through your worship, the surface of the runway is high enough, even on the west end there, but there would have been during some flooding down the property line and off that west end, there was likely flow of water. So yeah, no, I don't believe there's any damage there.
There was debris on the runway that had to be cleared by staff.
Possibly.
Okay, thank you. For Councillor Schumann, then Councillor Rogers?
So, the plan to resurface is not in this year's budget, would be in a future budget. Do we know which budget that would be? To staff, please.
So through your worship, and Patrick, I believe we were doing a conditions assessment of the runway. Is that done?
That is done.
That has just been completed.
That's just,
And the recommendation is in 2019?
I believe 2019,
Thank you. Councillor, I think Councillor Rogers or Councillor Parslow. Go ahead, Councillor Parslow.
So just refresh my memory, by adding 1,000 feet of runway, how does that change the capacity of the airport to accommodate the planes that we were told would be made in the future would be about 100 passengers? So can you put the two together?
So through your worship, without having the report in front, there's an extensive list of planes that could and couldn't land on 6,000, and there's a list also of 6,500 in the reports that we have. So if this were approved, we'd include that, but I would hate to ask Patrick to remember all of the planes that can land. I'm sure the larger ones you could comment on.
So the critical aircraft that could be accommodated would be the 737. With the maximum takeoff weight that it can do is 6,000 feet, 5,000 feet. It is possible, but it is a liability risk for the airline to take off.
And there's a number of other planes that also fit and don't fit.
737.
Yeah, that's around 130.
That's the WestJet, 737 jet. Councillor Rogers, did you have a question?
Yep. Drainage around the runway. Did that all get fixed? There was
Huh?
drainage?
So through your worship, I believe it's a carryover project, the drainage?
Yeah, so through your worship, there is a subsurface drainage project, which also included, just for the information, the subsurface drainage is essentially a drain tile that goes around the entire runway to deal with subsurface moisture that needs to be replaced, and that's causing stress on the runway itself because it's not working anymore. And so that's causing the surface to degrade with recreation. So that needs to be done. Along with that project was the culverts that are off the west end of the runway that run from Public Works Yard over towards the reclaim center. So there's existing culvert structures in there, but they've been identified that they need to be upgraded. So that's kind of one large project. Engineering was done It's been applied to, I believe, for ACAP funding. So it's just hurry up and wait now to see if we get ACAP funding, and if we do, then we proceed.
Okay, my opinion. I've read all of the reports, so going back to the early 1960s when we took it over. The population of Dawson Creek is still the same as it was back then. The opportunity to do something with the runway has come and gone. The extending the runway by 1,000 feet would still make it the shortest runway in northern BC that is still being operated. Planes are changing in 12 years. If you want to play catch up on the airport, you're going to have to come up with upwards of $30 million. Can you afford $30 million? I don't think so. And besides all of that, the airport is in the wrong spot to begin with. So why do you want to keep building on something that is not in the right spot? Theoretically, you should have a longer runway. You need up to, I think it's like 8,000 feet for cargo. That would be our biggest opportunity, would be for cargo. So yeah, moving the airport 45 minutes north would be perfect. And you'll save a whole lot of money. But I'm not in favor of investing any more money in the airport, personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schumann?
Yeah, so through yourself, the mayor, to staff, so the drainage issue out there, you're saying it's a wait and see to see if we get that funding. Would that funding be 100%? It would cover off 100% of that?
Yeah, it is.
But that is something that needs to be done prior to or along with, like, I'm just thinking of logistics, like, to go out and do stuff this year when we've got to do that stuff, plus the resurfacing in 2019. It seems to me it would be more reasonable to do it all at once.
So, through your worship, if council decided to extend the runway, it would be an opportunity to put all of those projects together. There's always alignment opportunities. If council chose not to extend the runway, we would pick away at those projects. They need to be done if we're going to continue to run the airport, resurfacing, drainage. But we're always trying to find efficiencies, and if we can mesh projects together, sometimes we find efficiencies.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
I lost my paper, that's okay, my thoughts are still in my head. I think when we look at the airport, and I've said this before, I think we have to stop looking at it as growing it and being as big or close to those around us. I think what we have to look at is what we have, the niche we have, and we need to cater to that and look after it. So we've seen with the new airline coming in, some pickup there, and I think what we need to do is look after what we have, so make sure these other issues are taken care of. And if 1,000-foot extension to the airport is going to allow for some bigger planes or some more traffic to come in, then we have to consider that. But we should only be looking at it from a niche point of view and not trying to be the Fort St. John Airport or the Grand Prairie Airport. Yes, we missed it. That's gone. It's not going to happen. But we need to look after what we do have and look after that accessibility to the community and for those that would use it, just like we do the highways coming into our community. So it is an outlet and an inlet for our community, and we need to look after what we have. So I'm happy to support it, get it in there for discussion, and look at how it's possible. And most of the stuff that's come through for the airport has had 100% funding for stuff that they've done and applied for. It's been covered. So this is, again, another way to leverage funding from other areas to look after something that we have and not increasing a huge budget load on our taxpayers. So I'm happy to support it, but I think we need to stop having the conversations of these bigger things, because that's not who we're going to be, that's not who we are, but we need to look after the niche we have.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, just a comment. It was just announced that there's a new mine opening in Tumbler. When Northeast Coal was being developed, there were lots and lots of aircraft coming in here connected to Northeast Coal. But that's an example of us attracting business based on the infrastructure that we have to offer. provide a good, safe airport for aircraft, and those people in Tumbler, rather than take the Braden Road to Fort St. John, they'll come into Dawson Creek and use our city, and not only the airport, but the entire city as a service center. So all of our businesses benefit, and to me, it just makes good sense. And I think Shaylee hit it on the head. We're not going after, this grandeur. We're looking at something that we can improve our service to, people in business, and I think we need to allocate the money now or in this budget so that we can start applying for grants. And I don't know if we'll build it this summer. I don't know if the logistics are right to build it this summer. It may be, better later, but we need to allocate the money so we can proceed with the planning and grant applications and planning for all this other work, the drainage and all that stuff, resurfacing. And
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Schumann?
Well, I have another question for staff.
One more.
You yourself, please.
This mid-amble?
No, this is not a manamble. This is a, can somebody tell me, can somebody tell me what the dollar amount was? Like, all this says is move that runway extension be considered in the next capital.
That
So I
part-
need to know how many millions of dollars moving this motion this year would be out of our 2018 budget.
Duncan?
So as part of the report, if this was approved or the information, we would bring back an updated cost estimate. We had previously looked at 6,500 feet, and that was around, give or take, $6 million at that point. I don't know what that cost would look like for 1,000 foot or 6,000 foot runway, and we'd have to update those numbers. I'd be hesitant to guess.
Okay.
We not only.
I just thought
that-
there was a number for
And that's the
1,000.
information we get.
Yeah, yeah.
Along with where does it come from and funding
Yeah.
sources and grants and all of that other.
All right.
Councillor Rogers?
Was curious.
I like the comment leveraging our asset that we have. Our asset that we have is land. If we sold that land, there's $20 million. All of our problems go away. And then we start collecting tax money
There will
on that
always
land that's
be
there.
new problems.
I believe it's 250 acres that's
All
out there.
figured out.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, so my 20 million is a very conservative.
Yeah,
number.
yeah.
We-
Thank you.
Tumbleweed.
Thank you so much for that.
It's a fire hall and a yards facility. Just saying.
Further discussion on the motion. You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Councillor Rogers and Parslow opposed?
that surprises me.
I just don't understand.
So we're skipping Rebecca.
410, we have Councillor Javetkov under item 410. Oh, sorry, 49. Councillor Javetkov has a paving project.
Oh, not street upgrades.
Yeah. Okay, I'll make a motion here, but, I think we should pave 115th Street, or 115th Avenue, all the way from 8th Street to the RV Sandy Dump, as well as the connecting streets from 116th to 115th. Now, I'd like to have the report on that, but I'd like to add in that we consider or have a couple of options, like for example, paving from 4th Street into the Sandy Dump, just so that we've got something to
So-
compare.
So get 115th Avenue paved into the Sandy Dump and give us options of how that can be accomplished with the cost implications of different options.
Yeah, different options, like maybe not do all of 115th Avenue, but maybe from the Sandy Dump on up to 4th Street.
And connect it into
7th.
116th.
Yeah.
Kevin, Duncan, you got that okay?
Yep.
Seconded? Councillor Parslow seconded? Speak to it, Councillor Wilbur, or Councillor Schumann, and then Councillor Parslow.
So I would like to, like, for myself, and I guess you guys will bring these numbers back, but I would like to see the paving be from 116th, I guess, over to the Sandy Dump area and use that as the route instead of paving all the way from 8th Street down through all of that industrial area to the Sandy Dump. I think it makes much more sense when you're pulling a big rig and you come in off the highway and go past the water reclaim and then to the Sandy Dump, or you turn at the major intersection on 116th and go into the Sandy Dump. This business of those big rigs trying to get off of 8th Street onto, I guess it's 4th or
It's safer
whatever that's.
utilizing the light.
Yeah, like I don't see the need to pave up to 8th Street from that. We've already got a beautifully paved 116th, and most of, except for that little short section off of the highway down First, which is in generally good condition as far as I'm concerned, and so I think for myself, it's just that little section from 116th to the Sandy Dump that would need to be done.
And that's the options I think that was
Yeah.
asked
So
for.
that'll come in there,
Yeah.
right? That's what I would like to see with that.
Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, I really think we need to pave access to this Sandy Dump. But also there's that waste water facility that's under construction right next to that. And that will be receiving pretty heavy loaded trucks, won't it? So the consideration I know staff would be on top of that, but it seems to me that the paving would have to be, is it thicker or some subsurface consideration of the heavy loaded trucks? Is that right, Kevin?
Yeah, we built to industrial standard.
Built to industrial standards. So I actually want to acknowledge that our CAO was right about something that I found.
Mark it down, mark it down.
I actually found the sign that you said was put up.
That you've seen.
It was on, there's a sign on 8th Street, and it's got a little arrow to talk about unloading whatever you've produced on your holiday, but it's also got an arrow that says you can fill up. And if it wasn't for Councillor Schumann and myself, that would be telling a lie, right? There was no potable water until we managed to correct that situation. So did you?
Great work.
So at any rate, on a
Did the
serious
sign
note,
go up afterwards?
that's great. I'm pleased to see the sign, and there's clear signage on 116th Avenue. However, if I am a visitor driving from the States through Alberta, and I drive on the Highway 2 past the airport and then take the truck bypass, I would never know that there was a Sandy Dump there. And I really think the signage to it needs to be improved. But going back to the topic of the paving, again, you've got those traffic lights on the first street, okay? There's an opportunity. The road yesterday was pretty bad. The road, 115th Avenue, was disgusting. And I was thinking, like you, that
Don't hold back.
100, no, well, it was,
It's a freeze-thaw cycle.
I'm on
That's
TV,
why.
I can't use the word. But gee, I would not want to take my little rig along that road at that time. But the point I want to ask is, if you went along 116th and you do as Councillor Schumann, I wouldn't think that there's sufficient turning for these. I'm not just thinking Sandy Dump here, I'm thinking about the wastewater treatment plants. You know what I mean? The load, the trucks that are going to be dumping their industrial stuff. So any comments about the logistics of doing what Councillor Schumann said? 116th going then 4th Street? Would they be able to turn and then turn back?
Your worship, on the street itself or on site?
No, on the streets.
Oh, on the street. Yeah, those large industrial trucks weave their way through there all the time. To
Okay.
get to the water sales, because they go through the water sales and come around.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they find a way through.
And that whole area, I think, needs to be paved.
You know, Councillor Javetkov raised it last year, 113th, 14th, 15th, and last year on, early in the year in June time, I went for a drive down there, and those three streets really need some significant work in some way. And they really, through Dice, Petroleum, Jocks, I think on 114th, the old, those 113th, 114th. And I think, honestly, I'm in support of this. We need to start picking away at that stuff east of 8th Street to start to get them up to a condition, because down through that 114th, I think it was, Holy or 13th, they were really, really bad. And we build our community, you got to get rid of them things, and you got to start picking away at them. And I think picking away at this by getting the 115th is one pick away. And I think I want to see it included. I'm in favor of it. Question's been called. You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Javetkoff has item 410, street upgrade.
At least I'm in. Okay, this motion, I will actually modify it. The only part of it that I want to make a motion on is that we ensure all of the lots in the city are serviced for sewer and water. I don't know how many are left, or if there are any that are left, but I think that's one of the basic services that we provide, and I think it should be completed. And then I can, if we get a seconder, I'll speak, or I could explain the rest of the motion. The rest of the motion is actually included in the $33 million drainage plan. So it will be dealt with in due course.
Seconded by Councillor Parslow.
You were-
Councillor Rogers?
Okay. I don't want to be here for this discussion because I have a lot that's not serviced currently.
Okay.
And then further to that, anything regarding the road at Brookside Cemetery, I won't be for that.
Okay. So you're going to excuse yourself? Thank you. Councillor Schumann, I think you were next.
Yeah. So obviously we're looking for costing and how many lots we have and what that would cost. That's what we're looking for. And I was thinking to myself, when I was reading these initially, I thought to myself that the first part of it would be covered in under that drainage master plan. So I would be absolutely in favor of looking at this.
Thank you. Further comments, further questions? Councillor Parslow?
Oh, no, I'm called the question.
Oh,
This is a no-brainer.
question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 411, I put forward a memo that one of the things that I think has been really, we talked a little bit about it last year when, I think Councillor Rogers can come back in now.
Oh, yeah.
No, let's leave him out.
Yeah.
No.
Tell them we're talking about the something.
Oh, now I know how they behave when I have to leave the room.
We were talking about you when you leave. One of the things that I think is a real big component around quality of life, and you see it in lots of communities, is the walking path, and as part of that overall infrastructure of pedestrian accessibility for walking and cycling. And I see the north end of town from 17th, Imperial Access, and 8th Street are all busy routes for people walking, running, pushing the carriages, running, and they're narrow roads with no sidewalks or walking areas. So you're either on the road or you're not on the road, and you're in the ditch. There's no side pieces to it, and I just worry about it from the perspective of safety. And so I think, to me, I'd really like us to consider pushing these forward. And I understand it through the developers that that's part of the subdivision development, that they put that connectivity, but I really want us to see us try to move these walking paths and accessibility for pedestrian access in our community. And I see that 17th, 8th, and Imperial Access, and so I want to move that forward as for consideration. Move seconded, Councillor McFadden. Discussion. Councillor Rogers?
Okay, semi-door stop. The college, did we not commit to bike lanes and stuff like that around the college, and then we took that away, or where are we at with that? Could I stop, please?
Duncan?
So through your worship, we had some funding allocated at the college. They were applying on a grant. They hoped that that funding would access a grant for them. They did not get that grant. We removed that funding and allocated it to 17
Yeah.
sidewalk.
It was, we put it in there to help them with the overall project at the college of the Skilled Trades Training Center, and it was gonna leverage their ability to get some dough, and didn't need it, so we didn't put it in.
Okay, so if we said we had staff look at this, so I guess staff would look into opportunities through grant funding and stuff through walking trails and paths, and let's call it a fire guard from now on, maybe. And also, I don't know if we should even include around the college, because I just think that that's something that I guess we can talk.
Yeah, I guess honestly, my expectation is this is gonna be a huge, this is gonna be a big cost. And so I'd just like to get us to get a sense of how much that dough is, and then how do we start to plan for it for the future, and where else under our master transportation plan do we have that for that connectivity we got to start to build it, so.
Yeah, and is there an opportunity to maybe say to the people that own that property, okay, we would like to see this, I know that it's not developed and stuff, but there has been some significant development going on in there. You'd think that at least 8th Street, because those duplexes are built partway up,
Yeah.
that would be considered anyways. And-
Yeah, 8th and 17th should be,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Schumann, and then Councillor Javetka.
So
Cons-
the 210 Imperial Access Road, so you're talking a walking path from 17th, from one side of the city across the top to 8th Street. So that 210 road, is that ours?
So that development will go right up to 210 on Imperial Access Road, that Harvest View subdivision. His plan is it'll be developed all the way up to Imperial Access.
So, but is that our road, or
No.
that's the regional?
But you would put it on the
road?
development of the property.
Oh, so it would be like across the
Yeah,
fields?
it would go on the, so across the ditch and inside, then on the property, it would be part of that development. It's part of the subdivision development, Kevin?
Inside the footprint.
Except there's no subdivision there, right?
Right.
Okay.
Just through your worship, part of that neighborhood plan called for a buffer all along the perimeter, because the agricultural land commission required that as part of the process. So as part of that buffer, that's where that trail would sit in, along with a fence and some landscaping. And that's, the overall build-out would be very similar.
Councillor Javetka, then Councillor Parsons.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing what the report looked like as far as cost and that type of thing. You know, we've got a lot of walking paths that were community projects done by, you know, groups in town, and that may be an option for that. I just had a question though about 17th Street, like we've got a sidewalk developed in there, just about completed, but we're not snow plowing it, like, now, a good friend of mine said that the landowners are supposed to snow plow it, and I don't know that for sure, but what's the scoop on that? I mean, that would form part of this whole
Yeah.
infrastructure.
Kevin, Duncan?
Yes, through your worship. That portion of the trail on 17th on the east side that we're constructing this fall, it's not complete, so we're not in a position to actually even clean it so it could be used, because it was incomplete.
Right.
Once it's completed next year, then it will be on the snow clearing route. And the bylaw says that you shall keep the sidewalk in front of your property clear, but on major routes such as 17th and 8th in Alaska, those are areas that we need clean. So I guess if you live on that, you get a break.
But you're not cleaning it.
We are, not the new one, on the east side, because it's not actually built yet. It's not done.
Well, the sidewalk, isn't it there on?
No,
Oh, in front of the other
It hasn't
stuff.
been finished
the
yet.
framing's just there for
There is
the
a section in front of the homes that are up north of Forest Street, but it's kind of a section of nowhere, so we would actually have to drive down the road to get to it, and that's, yeah.
But it's a section to nowhere, but the kids would have an opportunity to walk on that as opposed to on the road.
But they can't get to
Have to
it.
walk through the ditch for the rest of
And through your worship,
Just the forms.
we're not completed the sidewalk and we're not encouraging people to walk in an area that isn't completed. We don't know what the hazards are.
Okay, good. Councillor Parslow?
So the answer to a question that Kevin gave about the buffer, I think answered my question, because if there's no roads accessing that subdivision off this stretch of road, then fine. I was concerned that, you know, you put a sidewalk down and then the subdivision's developed and there's roads would cross that. So the buffer is complete from 17th to 8th.
there may be some accesses in there. I'd have to look back whether the Ministry of Transportation will allow any access to that road. There might be, but when that time comes, they would just have to cut through and tie in properly.
It's part of the plan for the development that they put forward for us there. So.
Second question, in the proposed budget, has anything been done about the dreadful and dangerous condition the paved footpath is in through Kin Park?
So through your worship, part of the money that was reallocated for the path from the college up to 17th, part of that money is allocated to do some maintenance on that path through there. We went through this summer, did an assessment of areas, and yeah, there's some areas that are not in great shape that need to be patched up. Unfortunately, paving contractor didn't get there to do it before fall.
So there is money to do some remediation.
Carry forward.
Councillor Wilbur?
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to, in the new development there closer to 8th where we had people move their fences because that was kind of designated area for walking trail or some sort of pedestrian thing. So when I'm looking at this and I'm thinking of options, is that looking at all of those connected pieces? Because when I look at the Imperial Road, I think of the development on the far side of 17th, not this side, that they built right up to the ditch, so there's not even any access to putting. So I'm just wondering if we're looking at, like, I like the idea of connecting the whole community and having this whole system, but I'm wondering if the options that we're gonna be looking at is actually connecting the neighborhoods as they've already been set, because we have a whole neighborhood that has no sidewalks, no nothing, but would be a part of that.
And so that
System.
connectivity is built into that plan, and so the perimeter as well as inside there has
Yeah.
all got that plan.
So that would be
And there
part
are
of that.
sidewalks that are part of that plan now, so.
Yeah. No, and I like the connectivity, but I'm just thinking in my head, I remember us saying to some people they had to move their fence in because it was actually intended for a walkway to be there, so
Yeah, it's
I
not
don't picture it
completed.
going through a field and along the road. I'm thinking that the options we're gonna be looking at with all these plans we have is connecting the neighborhoods that exist with that plan.
And that's all
Am I
part of
correct in
inside
thinking
that, that's all part of inside that master transportation plan.
And it's in the OCP, the existing one.
I'm just trying to get it clear in my
Yeah.
head that that is what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, well, I do like the idea of connecting the communities up and walking paths. But tell me, 8th Street, this walking path along the northern stretch, you know, the Imperial Road, there's no walkway on 8th Street, is there? At the very top.
No, but that's.
Ends at 90th.
The sidewalk ends at about 89th or 90th, and then the walkway would need to be constructed from there along 8th, up along some of those existing homes, and
Yes.
eventually all the way up to the corner and then across.
So that's not envisaged in this particular proposal.
Yep, that's what I'm
That's
talking
it.
about.
It's in.
You go north from 8th Street, from 90th Avenue up to Imperial Access Road to Knoblaws,
And then
West.
come west,
from Imperial to 17th.
Yeah.
And then 17th down on the west side of 17th Street to connect with that development that's there now, and then connect it through to the forestry, and then you've got the entire north end of the community connected with sidewalks basically from Alaska Avenue to Alaska Avenue on 8th Street, 17th Street.
yeah, I see how it's covered in the layout. Thank you.
About 3 miles.
Yeah. Big job.
Yeah,
Big.
big job.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. The last one I wanted to put forward, and from my perspective, is now that we've demolished the old Grandview School property building and the Performing Arts Center, and originally when the building was still up there, before we demolished it, we gave the direction that we wanted to develop it into, put it out for an RFP to see if we get a private developer in there. And now that we've got dirt there, I would really like us to now move forward with some direction on that property. And for me, I think we got two, from my perspective, that I'd like to propose in the development is seniors in a partnership with Northern Health and the province, as well as affordable housing through BC Housing, to try to find a mixed complex of us developing that property for the benefit of particularly seniors housing, but also affordable housing. But we need to give that direction to start to have that planning work in place, and that's what I would like to move forward with. Councillor Parsons?
I'd like to move that.
Seconded, Councillor Schumann. Discussion? Councillor Schumann?
So, over the years, I've sat on different committees within the community on housing needs, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the missing components that we have within Dawson Creek is the transitional housing. So the housing that one might access should they come out of hospital and not have somewhere to go, or come out of mitzvah house and not have housing. It's sort of like a temporary housing until people can get their stuff organized and then stabilized and then move on. So I love this. We absolutely have this great piece of property on transit routes and all of that. It's perfect. And so I absolutely support this. I would like to see a little bit of transitional housing in there also.
Well, and I think if we give that direction, because I didn't know if council was honestly of the view that we move it out, just put it out to an RFP to get it developed for residential or to a private developer and see what, but to me, we then, if council are in agreement to look to seniors and affordable, then let's engage our community associations and our organizations, South Peace Community Resources Society, the Society for Community Living, Northern Health, and all the different organizations. Say, what's the gap and what do we move forward with, and then how do we start to develop that proposal? So, Councillor Wilbur?
In just some of the different forums and stuff I've been to, or BC Housing, the one that comes to mind was the last one at UMBC. So BC Housing is really only looking at funding projects that are combined housing, and they're realizing that this siloed type of living isn't healthy and not good for neighborhoods. So I think we would have more benefit in having those partnerships, and I know Spickers does have a plan and is in talks with BC Housing on what's called affordable housing. So it allows for transition, it allows for seniors and age-in-place living. So look, I'm happy to see that as a whole, and I think it's a great neighborhood.
Great location. Park, we got busing, we got a neighborhood residential, you got Northern Health right there with Rotary Manor. It's just, I think it's an ideal location for us to try to explore that and build. We're hearing it more and more, both the North Piece and South Piece, about housing for seniors and what does that need look like. And so for me, I think it's now this isn't really a capital budget item, but it's certainly a budget item that we can start to move it forward, I hope.
Pave it.
Don't.
Man, I got Lindy in here all of a sudden.
Didn't you listen to
Have
the
we got
drainage report?
any further discussion on the motion?
Question.
Questions been called? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Wilbur, Economic Development for budget.
So, yeah, not capital, but I wanted everyone to get their head in that space moving forward. So I'd like to move that $10,000 from the economic development budget envelope be designated to Sustainable Dawson Creek to be utilized for economic development activities at community events. And this would include a partnership with Sustainability Dawson Creek and Love Dawson Creek. And if I get a seconder, I can talk more to it.
Councillor McFadden, go ahead.
So I have stayed true to council's wishes that I don't ask for any budget funding or money for Love Dawson Creek since it started. In saying that, I have put money out of my own pocket, and I'm happy to do what I can. But I have created a unique relationship with Sustainable Dawson Creek, and it works very, very well. And I'm not asking for new budget money. I'm just asking that staff look at that envelope within the budget and move $10,000 over that we can utilize as a partnership and boost economic development for our local small businesses, whether they be a part of Love Dawson Creek or not, but they are the foundation of our community, and I think we should support them as we can. And there's many, many activities that we already have that would allow us to do that, but funding would be nice to just bump it up to the next level and be able to do more. So right now, I'm running on a very tight budget of $1,200 a year, and I've been very successful at doing that. And but I think it's time, as a community and as a city, we say, you know what, our foundational businesses are important to us, and we need to do what we can to bolster that economic driver in the community.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers?
I think Councillor Wilbur has spent a lot of time on this and a lot of effort to help develop that program. It is proven a benefit to the local citizens, and she's never really asked for anything, and I think that we should give it to her because.
So she just takes it away from the mayor's economic development budget?
Yes.
Well,
I'll send you a thank you card.
Do you want me to speak to that?
Yeah.
Or we could just find her $10,000 that isn't in his economic development plan or
I
fund.
do think that staff has had recently, it's kind of tough to get that 50 grand through NDIT, and I think that this is another way we can
Leverage.
help justify it.
Thank you. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Anything else that come out of this today that you feel, Duncan?
Sorry, through your worship, we have some items in the report themselves that we're looking for some direction on.
Okay.
Okay, you're gonna have to
Get
point
the
them
ship
out.
to the island.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to point those out.
They're
5
in
minutes.
Adam's report, and they're on
Yeah.
page,
I'm against them all.
page 3,
Page 3,
and there's
I'm
5
with you.
items.
page 3, Brookside Cemetery, Public Works Yard,
Brookside
fireplace,
Cemetery.
or fire hall.
So, Mark has a conflict, he should be removed from this.
Do you guys want to talk about Brookside, then I'll
Yes,
come back?
Yeah, go ahead.
And then Adam could just move down a chair in case Councillor Parslow wishes to harass us.
So, go ahead, Councillor Parson.
Well, I remember bringing this Brookside Cemetery, the access to the Brookside Cemetery up. I think maybe other people did as well. There was concern, remember, about getting to a funeral that a lot of out-of-town people were attending, and the road was in a dreadful condition because of the usage of the road. It was break-up time, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, spring, through your worship.
And people were standing in mud and water, and it was, that's a tough time for people, and it was made awful by the condition. So I think I suggested it be some drainage and maybe even paving it.
Duncan?
So, through your worship, there is a report on the December 18th council meeting that identifies a cost and recommendation of receive for information. So it's already on that agenda.
It's included in it ready.
So council could table this to that discussion.
Okay. Okay. Do we want Mark back in or no?
No,
Okay.
It's tabled.
Public Works here.
Did we table it?
we're going to do
It's-
it.
well, we don't-
the Monday agenda.
We don't need to provide direction because it's on the agenda,
Okay.
so.
What is this one?
Oh, wait, Therese. So the Public Works Yard relocation was another topic of discussion that we had. Duncan?
So through your worship, there's been a lot of discussion about public works, the conditions of the facilities, the possibility of relocation. In the current budget, there's, in the capital budget, there's an allocation of funding approximately $500,000 for expansion on the public works facility existing to accommodate kind of the immediate need, but not a long-term plan. Just an update for council.
And so for me, I think this is part of the overall package of material and the projects we're going to have to decide upon. I understood anyway, I thought, and I thought that would carry forward, and we prioritized some today. And these 4 or 5 were the ones that were also included in that overall envelope of stuff that council had given direction on. But I'm good if we want to have the discussion about each one of them individually now to give administration that direction. Councillor Javetka?
I'll make a motion that we include all of them in that, in the report for future consideration.
All of what, all
All
those
these-
five?
The Public Works, the Fire Hall, the Sudeten Hall, and the Encana Event Center West End Suite expansion. So those 4 that we've had discussion on, we've provided some information and had some conversation. But do you want to do them, so your motion is to include all 4, to have administration bring those reports back to council for our budget deliberation under capital. So I have that as a motion. Discussion. Our seconder, please. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McFadden, discussion. Councillor Rogers, then Councillor Schumann.
Well, Sudeten Hall, I thought that there was foundation issues, so why would we even bring that forward until they get an assessment on the foundation? Public Works, and the Fire Hall, if it gets down to a choice between Public Works and the Fire Hall, I think Public Works should be prioritized to be done right away. There's, through the tangible capital assets, there's $207 million that Dawson Creek has in infrastructure and buildings and everything else. The people that take care of that infrastructure and all of that are the people that are out of the Public Works yard. They're seldom recognized for everything that they do. And if you look at the facility and you were to take a local shop in town, like a mechanic shop in town, and you were to look at the mechanic shop out there, there's something seriously wrong with the facilities that are out there that are supposed to be looking after over $200 million worth of infrastructure, et cetera. I think that the conditions that are out there, in my opinion, are not acceptable for the workers that are out there. And I don't believe that a Band-Aid solution for it is prudent. I think that something should be done. A plan should be addressed in the 2018 budget as to what we are exactly going to do with that facility out there and start on that.
But then that's the recommendation on the motion, is that we bring that material forward and council then go through the prioritization process of exactly that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just voicing my number one priority.
Yeah, good. Councillor Parslow, did you have a question, or was it Schumann?
Me.
So,
Was me.
go ahead, and then Councillor Parslow. I didn't see,
You can't
It's
see you
because
behind the
he's hiding
post.
behind the post.
I was concentrating, I was listening to Councillor
Okay.
Rogers.
Councillor
So,
Schumann.
I know the motion is to move these all forward for information back, but I would like to scratch the bottom on the Encana Event Center West End Suite expansion. Like, I know we had like little conversations about that, but like honestly, I didn't think it was serious. I didn't think it was, like, we were
Duncan?
actually doing it.
So through your worship, everything on this list at some point, whether it was in the 2017 budget process or throughout 2017 council deferred to budget deliberations, we've gone back through the minutes to make sure we didn't miss anything and bring forward all of council's direction. So a couple of these items, I think the suites in particular were deferred from the 2017 actual budget process, wasn't included, bring it back in 2018.
Councillor Parslow, then Councillor
Well, I'd
Schumann.
like to move an amendment that the last item be deleted from the list.
And I'll second that amendment.
Okay. Councillor Javetka?
I would like to leave it in. I think Mark had a pretty interesting comment to start with here just about 3 hours ago, or maybe 2 hours ago, that, you know, perhaps there's somebody out there, if we identify the cost and the scope of work in that, there's somebody out there that may take it on as an investment, you know, and build a thing, recover their money, and then it converts to the city. I think it's worth discussing.
Councillor Schumann, and then Councillor Rogers.
I just feel like there's a lot of things on this list, within these 5 items themselves, that totally trump this a suite expansion. And if, in my view, if we were doing anything out there, upgrading or doing anything more out there, it wouldn't be a suite expansion, it would be a meeting space, a convention space. So
Included.
I'm not I'm not in favor of us doing this. If the event center wanna work, or you wanna go and get to it, or raise some money or whatever, yay, but as far as I'm concerned, a fire hall and a public works and some siding on Sudeten totally trumps a suite expansion.
Councillor Roger?
Could we change that to say that, that Global would look at possibly getting people to invest in the suite expansion, rooms?
Well, we're not approving the development of these. We're asking for administration to bring that report back to us for that information for council's consideration.
So I just look at it and go, well, how hard is it to bring back a report on the possibility of private citizens purchasing equity in our facilities, attaching that with a lease, and then we get it back? Like, we're not doing anything.
Yeah, we're not, I guess that was my point, we're not approving it, we're asking for that information to be brought back on the report of the option. Councillor Wilbur?
I just look at the suite expansion and think it's a nice thing to have, but I think we've put a lot of work on staff's shoulders, and to me, right now, at this point in time, the information I want brought back, that's just not on a priority list, I don't think, for the community. I think there's some really big things here that are gonna be a great workload for our staff, and I think this is a nicety that could be looked at down the road. Right now, I don't think that should be a priority, on the priority list for staff to bring back information to us. I think it's a nice thing to have. I don't think it's a necessity at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers?
I just think it's an opportunity to generate and lessen the net subsidy that is going to be a cost to the taxpayers in the future by developing that space. You can get money, it can get paid for, we end up getting it back, we earn revenue from it. Same as a convention center. It's not the city's risk. It would be a developer's risk. We do just ask for a report.
Thank you. Councillor Parsley?
Yes, I just don't think I'm interested in receiving a report on this. If Councillor Rogers wants to make a motion that Global Spectrum be encouraged to solicit private interest and then come back with a proposal, but I don't want to. Staff's got a lot of reports here, which concerns me, and some of these items that we've asked for reports are dubiously fundable anyway, so I don't see the point of doing that. It doesn't stop Global Spectrum showing some initiative, as they often do with different proposals for events, about the facility improvement, not on the taxpayers' backs.
Thank you. Councillor Javekar?
I don't see this as a big challenge to administration to doing the report. It was presented last year, the numbers were there. Add the cost of living increase and submit it. It's not a big deal. There's a lot of reports that we ask for that are a big deal, but this one isn't.
Thank you. And so have we got an amendment on the motion to remove the suites from the main motion?
Yes.
So are you ready for the question? So the amendment is that we're going to remove the suite expansion from the list. All those in favor of removing it? Opposed? It's carried, thank you, so that'll be off. And now on the main motion, that we're going to ask for staff to bring forward the reports on these other items. Are you ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Oh,
Councillor Schumann?
so I read in here somewhere another consideration would be something around the garbage, pick up the waste management, and whether or not you wanted direction on whether or not we would subsidize using our reserves to subsidize that increase that would be coming. Is there going to be a report on that? Are we going to, personally, I don't want to subsidize anybody's garbage rates. If it costs X number of dollars for people to get their garbage picked up because of contracts and tipping fees and blah, 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 then the user needs to pay for that, not out of reserves.
Duncan?
So there was somewhere in there I read that. I know there was.
So through your worship, I believe in your 4.2 recycling,
That'll be covered?
Yeah, I thought that you had,
You added that.
Talked
yeah,
about it.
you added that into your
I
motion
did, but I
about.
thought it was somewhere in here.
It's possible.
Adam.
Is that in there? Maybe it's a previous report in the budget assumptions, possibly?
Maybe. I read it in this.
Yeah, so you've included that in your motion, that, what would it look like if we didn't apply, the reserve to, curbside pickup, yeah. So we'll address that in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers, did you have one? And then Councillor Parsons? Did you have one other item you, I thought I saw your hand go up. You and Councillor Schumann were in a race there.
No, it was, I'll just
picking
bring
his-
it, I'll
he was
just bring it
picking
up
his
as new
nose.
council business on Monday.
Thank you. Councillor Parslow.
This
Can you-
question, I asked not the last council meeting because I wasn't here, the one before that, and I asked staff how the per person tonnage of garbage taken to our dump, and you were going to get that information.
Do we have that yet, Kevin?
I'll make sure I have it for,
You were going to reference that email I sent you, which you hadn't read yesterday.
Neither Kevin nor
He's
I
been away
could find
sick.
it, so maybe you just spoke to it, because we don't have it.
You don't?
Neither of us have it.
Oh, okay. It was
Maybe you're
from
on our
it was
spam
from-
list.
I
It was
forwarded
just-
it. I got it from Melanie.
He was just thinking about sending it.
No, I did it. It was from
Any further business? Ready? Motion to adjourn. Councillor McFadden, Councillor Wilbur. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you, everybody. That was